Friends, summarizing large piece of text or documents such as books is a very useful and important task. For example, we may want to quickly skim through a large book, or we may want to get the gist of a very long news article, right? And another example could be, let's say we have a very long meeting and we want to create a summary of the meeting for those who could not attend, right? And there will be many more scenarios where we might want to create a summary of a very large document. Now, the recent developments in generative AI, particularly the large language models, they are doing a very good job of summarizing large documents. But all these models have a limitation called the context token limit. Okay, here we are seeing a few models, but there are dozens and dozens of model. As you can see, each model has a certain token limit. Now the token, it loosely translate into a word, and the longer words, they can be broken up into two or three tokens. Okay, but loosely we can take it as a word. One token is equal to one word. For example, let's say the GPT-3, the medium, large, and XL model, they have a token limit of 4096 tokens, right? So we cannot summarize a document which is longer than 4000, roughly 4000 tokens, okay, using the GPT-3 model. Now this is due to the memory issues. Now how do we tackle this? Okay, so there are four ways. Well, actually three. The first one isn't really addressing the challenge, but the first method is called stuffing. What we simply do is we'll just truncate the document to the maximum number of tokens allowed. Okay, for example, let's say we have a document of let's say 10,000 words. If we are using BERT model, we will take only the first 512 words. Or if we are using GPT-3 base model, we will simply take the first 2048 tokens or words. Okay, so that's the stuffing method. In the next slide, we will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of these all these four methods. Now the stuffing method look like it's not really addressing the problem, but it has its advantages as well. Okay, we will see that in the next slide. And the second method, it's called map reduce. Okay, so there are two steps to this method. During the map phase, what we do is we split these large document into smaller chunks. Okay, again going back to the example, if we have a, let's say, a document of 10,000 tokens, we might break that into 5 chunks, each with 2000 tokens, and then we use GPT-3 base model. Okay, and then we create the summary for each chunk of text. Okay, this is the map phase. And in the reduce phase, we will concatenate all the summaries from all the 5 chunks, and then we will create a final summary. Okay, that's method number 2. And third number, this is improvised versions of map reduce, third and fourth method. So in the third one, we will have overlapping chunks. So it's same as map reduce, but the difference is this time, instead of summarizing one chunk at a time, we will summarize a couple of chunks at a time, right? For example, if we divide the document into 5 chunks, we might summarize 1 and 2 together, 2 and 3 together, 3 and 4 together, and so forth. Now again, in the next slide, we will discuss why we are doing it. Okay, and finally, the map reduce with rolling summary. Now in this method, what we do is, instead of summarizing few chunks together, what we do is we take the summary from the previous chunk as a context, and we take the current chunk, and then we do the summarization. Okay, Now, it will be clear now why we are doing uh, why we are taking these different approaches. Okay. First, let's take the stuffing method, right? Even though we are not addressing the problem here, the advantage is we are making only one call to the function or the API. Okay, so that has low cost in terms of number of calls. Now, the model is able to see all the text at once. So it is understanding from the beginning to the end what is the document talking about. Okay, so it has all the text at once. Now the disadvantages, as you know, we have the token limit, so we cannot summarize the large document. This method works only for small documents. Now the second method with map reduce and the remaining two methods, we are able to process the large documents. So that's the advantage. And we can also do the parallel processing for map reduce. Now the disadvantages are we have to make multiple calls, right? For example, when we divide a document of 10,000 tokens into chunks of 2,000 each, we need to make 5 calls. Okay, because here we are treating each chunk as individual entities separate from one another, the context between the chunks or the pages gets lost. Okay, so read these pages as chunks. Okay, so when we process the second chunk, it's the model do not have any knowledge of the previous chunk, right? So we are losing the context between these chunks. That's the main disadvantages. And that disadvantage we are addressing in the next method, which is called this overlapping chunks. Okay, and uh, yeah, in addition to the large documents and parallel processing, this time we also have the context between different chunks preserved, right? But again, the same disadvantage, the multiple calls, and more importantly, we are processing, let's say, chunk 1 and 2 together, then chunk 2 and 3 together, 3 and 4 together, etc. Let's say we have taken 2 as the number of chunks when processing. Now, as you can see, here we are increasing the length of the text, right? Because in the first function call, we have chunk 1 and 2. In the second function call, we have chunk 2 and 3. So the chunk 2, we have used it twice, one with chunk 1 and the second time with chunk 3, right? So here we are making the text even larger, right? Even though it is the same one, because it is used in multiple function calls. So the amount of text we are processing is more, which means it's a slower process or it's going to cost more. Okay. And in the final rolling summary method, uh, yes, we can process the large documents and the context between pages is also preserved. Uh, but here we are addressing this larger input text issue, right? So instead of taking the chunk as it is, we will be taking simply the summary of the previous chunk, which will be much shorter than the chunk itself, right? So to some extent, we are addressing the major disadvantage with the overlapping chunks method. Okay, but the main disadvantage with this one is the parallel processing becomes a little harder, because we cannot process all these chunks separately, because for each chunk we need to have the summary of the previous chunk, right? So we might have to wait until the previous chunk summary is being created. Okay, so the parallel processing becomes a little harder. All right, so those are the 4 different methods on how to address the token limit issue with large language models when summarizing the documents. Okay, so in the next 2 videos, we will see how to implement all these 4 methods using Google's Vertex AI. And in the second video, we will use long chains framework. That's all for this video. Thank you very much.